really excited to be here. My name is Chris. I live in the Netherlands, but I grew up in Seattle, Washington. I've lived in Europe now for about 13 years, so I've been broken down as an American living in Europe might. And I hope rebuilt. As you know, it's quite a difference. The ecosystem in Europe and the ecosystem in the US have come to realize is that in general, I need to respect the cultures that I'm in, but I also have to assert what I am as well and what I'm about. And what I really think that I hope to bring today are some stories and some experiences from the field in terms of companies over the last 20 years that I've worked with my own company for the first 10 years, where I was the head of product development. And so I had a very product-centric view of the world to the last 10 years or so when I've been in Europe, where I've worked with 30 or 40 companies and a couple hundred showcases who are going international, generally in the business-to-business area, out of Germany, out of Estonia, out of Poland, the Netherlands, Belgium, and typically 6-month to 24-month projects. So very intense. Delivery-oriented projects that really had to grow, or the founders would sniff it out and they would figure it out, and you wouldn't be there for very long. As a former founder myself, sometimes I feel we miss a lot of the key points as we go through this experience in our lives. Such a unique one, maybe we have multiple lives, I'm not sure, but I know that we have this one, and we can take advantage of using it and perhaps not have to do everything in sequential order, but begin parallel processing in our development and in our strategies. Other things that I would like to talk about if I had more time would be the benefits of doing a startup in terms of, honestly, your family life. Even though I know it's crazy, you still determine and you know more of what's going on than when you had that corporate job. You have visibility into your company. You know the struggles. There's nothing hidden as a founder. And you have time. I know that for myself, I've had a lot more time and more flexibility with my family. I really appreciated that. I think also the impact that you're making, although the culture of your business, the influence you're having on your employees, the influence you're having on the world as well. I know that a lot of companies in here are out of the photonics area, some microelectronics, other aspects of technologies that help us not only do things better, faster, cheaper, but hopefully make a smaller footprint on the world and can have a positive impact. So that's something I won't talk a lot about today. I won't talk about what's going to happen when you finish this company and you take a breath and you look back and you say, what was that all about? What did I just do? And hopefully there's money in your pocket. And hopefully your spouse is saying all that time and effort you put in was worth it because you could have gotten a better paying job out there in the market. But I hope that you look back and you say it was really a rich experience. And I won't talk about the fact that when all of this is done, the real goal is to have all of us, on the rocking chairs laughing about the good old days and how amazing it was. So I won't talk about any of that stuff, but I think those things are super important for you guys as entrepreneurs, as investors, and people that are involved in the market.
So Chris, may I just?
Yes.
You are a quick starter, and I just want to make sure that everyone knows why you're here.
Yes, please.
So Chris is our expert. So as you guys know, we've launched something that we call VEC Community. And VEC Community, pretty much, the main goal of that is to increase the value of our portfolio companies through experts like that, like Chris. So pretty much what we are doing today, we are launching, I would say, a series or a habit of meetings where we'll be sharing kind of experts' knowledge so that you guys can leverage that in terms of tools, processes, expertise, contacts to grow your business. And Chris is one of our experts that we have within our community. Today we have 3 experts. Today you guys will see one expert that's already in the network, but also you will see other guys that are pretty much our partners in terms of other sales activities. So this is kind of a kickoff. So I'm glad that you took over. So I'll leave the stage to you. But if you will have any questions or you will, want to get to know Chris a little bit more after the meeting, just let us know and we'll connect you guys together. Okay. And this will be recorded, so you will also get the video.
Thank you very much, Doug,
All right.
for that. Yeah, for that interjection. So hopefully the context is a little bit more set on some random guy off the street just grabbed. Who's this guy? That's right. That's right. Who's this guy with the green shoes? My luggage didn't come in, by the way, so I'm wearing the same stuff I had to wear yesterday. Apologies for that. So anyway, there's tons of things to talk about, and do it in an open way, and in a way where you can really let your hair down and you can really be yourself and really get to the essence of what this is all about. So I'm not here to be prescriptive and say, this is how you got to do it. But what I want to try to do is I want to distill some of the lessons that I've learned over the years and provide them on a palette, and then you guys can decide what's useful for you. And by the way, I would just say, I'm available 8 hours a month anyway, so I've got to find some things to do. So if you ever have things some coaching or some research, just give me a call. But let me go ahead and proceed with the presentation. So we're here to talk about how to use remote go-to-market strategy as a way of starting your international expansion. We all know that with COVID, companies do not want to spend money hiring, sending people off into the hinterlands until they know that it's worth it. They know that the payoff is there, and they know that the risks aren't so great that it will disrupt the payoff. So we're going to talk about how to add value and do it in a low-risk approach. And we're going to do this basically considering projects that we've worked on over the years and trying to bring those to the fore. First of all, what is a go-to-market strategy? So a go-to-market strategy generally is something that's going to help you to define your customers, to coordinate your messaging, position your product, and it basically is going to help you ensure that whatever you're doing, the unit economics of what you're doing are going to be strong. These are generally used for companies that have existing products going into new markets. So you've got a great regional play, you've got customers in Europe, but you want to have US customers, or maybe you've got a couple US customers, but you really haven't thought about why they came to you and what it is that you need to do to get more of them. Or you're taking a new product and you're trying to grow it out. So today we'll be talking a little bit about four activities. So we'll talk about go-to-market discovery. So how you discover your go-to-market strategy. We'll talk about building a global strategy and selecting markets. We'll talk about video sales letters. This took me many years to figure this out, but I'm pretty much convinced that video sales letters that are very well written and are very thoughtful in terms of taking the feedback from the markets you're trying to enter and understanding the sub questions that pop up in the executives' heads when you pitch them, and they don't tell you that, but there are these questions, and we all do it because we're critical beings. But understanding what those perspectives are and really architecting them into your videos, especially now when we don't travel as much, video has become an incredibly powerful tool. And I think that if maybe the last 15, 20 years has been a revolution in B2C, I think this is the core beginnings of the revolution in B2B. Inbound versus outbound as well. I'll talk a little bit about that and the role that plays in this process here. So 3 fun tactics. These, to me, if you walk away with 3 little thorns in your brain that you sort of ponder or think about later, these would be 3 of those things that I would say to walk away with. One is called interruption. So not disruption, but interruption. And interruption is where you're getting into the mind of your buyer and you're challenging some of their core beliefs. So you're really changing how they think. And if you understand the 2 or 3 core beliefs that your prospects have that are fundamental to enabling a sale, then you're going to understand their center of gravity, and you're going to make it a lot easier to penetrate and get across the membrane into that organization. Pre-location. So getting knowledge in front of your clients, even when your competition has 20x more funding than you do, or has 2 times more people than you do. How do you get your knowledge in front of your clients, both in the physical world, but also in the virtual or the remote world? And preemption. How do you begin before the game has begun? Usually, I'm not sure how many people think that they're in markets that are mature, where their product is surrounded by lots of competitors, and they're having to really look at the differentiation of their product. How many companies feel that they're in the markets that are immature, where they're actually the only game in town, but they're spending a lot of time educating the customer on what this is? How many people feel like the timing is sort of perfect, they're right there in the market and they're really nailing it? So Yes, it's pretty tough to get it exactly perfectly right? But there are different traits of what happens when you're going into different types of mature markets. And the message that I have, and I'll give some examples later, is that in general, preemption is generally a better strategy if you can kind of get in there and begin soft pedaling your sales a little bit early. The other thing is I'm a big sort of sideline fan of machine learning. I've worked with about 20 machine learning companies on the business side. I mean, I was in product development before, but again, I was the product manager, so I wasn't the engineer building it. I worked with the engineering team, but I really like this idea of learning. And you know that the things that's changing in machine learning right now is the fact that you have imitation learning, imitation learning where you're learning from demonstration, and you have reinforcement learning where you're learning through experience. And what I think we're trying to do here today is really impress upon you that you can use both of these techniques as a startup. You can use imitation learning by using practices that other people have used and just skip to the point. You can do things also by practicing and testing the market and tuning things so that they fit appropriately to you. So these are all concepts that I love these concepts, and they all come from mobility strategy. I mean, I don't want to bring up the Ukraine stuff too much, but you can see the amazing things they're doing in Ukraine through mobility strategy and very, just smart, agile activities. And startups have got to be working in that way as well. So introduction. So again, my name is Chris Mott. I'm the founder of globalventure.com. We've been around for about 5-6 years doing growth consulting. I am challenged with getting our name out. It's difficult to get out there. There's a lot of noise in the market. What I hope to learn today is what you guys are doing and ways that we can apply some of these techniques to what you're doing. Would anyone else like to, actually, let's do it this way. Since we don't have a lot of time, why don't you guys turn to the people next to you, so the people to your left, to your right, in front and back, and just do these things really briefly. So introduce yourself and talk about what challenges you face and what you're hoping to learn today. So go ahead and do that with each other. And to close out your discussion, we're gonna get started again. Yeah, it's always nice. It's always nice to get to other people. It's probably a lot of you guys know each other actually. But anyway, although I would really like to take the time to go through these with each and every one of you, trust me, I really would, because it gives me a better feeling for what I should talk about. For now, I'd like to just focus on the last question of what you hope to learn today. So can people just maybe tell me what some of the things that they're hoping to learn today? And if you didn't talk about this and you can think of something, you can also say it. So please, let's get a little list here. Yes.
So we are implementing remote sales in Mexico.
Yes.
And so we would like to confirm if our go-to-market was close to correct or
yes,
correct that.
Yeah, there you go. Like how to do it and not spend a lot of money. Okay. That's great. Yeah, that's perfect example. I could just go on that one alone. But any other scenarios, things you guys that are a pain in your rear end, or things that you struggle with or your team struggles with. Imagine yourself 3 years from now with your company. Has it been frictionless? Was it completely a cakewalk, or were there some obstacles? What are the obstacles?
We are going to expand internationally by creating an international network of partners.
Okay, so you have partnerships.
Yeah. Would like to have 20, 30 partners in Europe representing us and selling our robots. So validation of that approach is something interesting.
Oh, wow. Okay, good.
Same US.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Anything else, guys? Yes.
Yeah, it's pretty much similar like the first two, maybe add on to look at different ways of how to approach the markets.
Yeah.
One is opening the office, the other partnership, 37 sales agents. How to do completely remote and steal some good ideas implementing in our business.
All right, yeah, those are all very, I think, in the wheelhouse of things that we should cover today. So if there's anything else you guys want to put up here while I'm not looking, please feel free. Feel free. Okay, well, great. I mean, now we can anchor a little bit here. Anything else? Otherwise, we'll go ahead and proceed. So just a quick background. So as I said, I told you already, 10 years doing product development. So I love product development. And when I moved to Europe with my lovely partner, she wanted to be close to the family. We decided to come to Europe. I'd been at the startup for 8 years. I'd gone to grad school at Berkeley, co-founded the company afterwards. And we were cranking away, and I offered to open an office in Europe. The board said they didn't want to do it, and I decided to come anyway. Okay, I felt I still have a great relationship with my co-founder, the other folks, but I decided to come over here. And what I found was that the challenges that we faced on the growth side was something that I fell into. People here weren't looking for a product manager from America to do their B2B application roadmap. This is again, 10, 12 years ago. They were looking for someone that could bring them American revenue to their business. So I think I got slotted very quickly into the growth side of the business. Got 3 kids. They're all teenagers. And again, I grew up in Seattle. I went to UCLA undergraduate. I was an English literature major, if you can imagine. And I was at business school at Berkeley. From a business perspective, again, those years as a B2B guy, before that I was at IBM doing enterprise ERP stuff. I actually lived in Ukraine. I lived in Mykolaiv. I was at IBM. It was Pricewaterhouse before that. We had a large global contract doing privatization. I don't know if we're to blame for the issues there or we contributed something there. I'm not sure, but I worked literally in Mykolaiv in the mayor's office with an economic advisor back when, before I went back to grad school. And so I never imagined seeing Mykolaiv like I do on the news these days. It's very difficult to watch. In Europe, the last 10 years, I began as a nanotech VC with the ex-Philips CEO, North America. That was not a role for me. That was early stage. I was meant to be in growth, international stuff, so I moved on from that and worked as an AI lead for Oracle for a few years and then started this business. So these examples that we'll talk about. So market maturity wise, XTPL in Wrocław, they're a nanoelectronics company. They went in when the market was immature. It was early. Hugo in natural language and Adyen IoT, they hit the market right on time. Hippo, Gravity, Algolytics, they all went late. And each of those has challenges, strengths, and weaknesses. I mean, the bottom line is that when you go on time, things click. Adyen was able to become the first app on Cisco's router for their industrial solutions about 8 years ago. So the timing was there. They just happened to be there and selling into the market at the time that Cisco was opening up its boxes and allowing external applications to be put on their box. And so they got pretty lucky. It was serendipitous. Hugo happened to have some great clients in Europe. So they had spent about a year in the US trying to become the next generation of Bing. So remember Bing with Microsoft's answer to Google search and so forth. And they wanted to be an NLP bolt-on for Bing. And they spent a year trying to do it. And then they realized, oh my gosh, we've got 3 airline clients, KLM, Air France, and Lufthansa. We have 3 telco clients, Movistar, Deutsche Telekom, et cetera. Why don't we rejigger our website, focus it more on industry, and then hammer on those American players in these same industries. And within 5 months of starting that decision, we had $500,000 in revenue, ARR, repeatable from Bank of America and United Airlines. I don't think we'll ever achieve that again. It was a super fast one, and I hesitate to tell clients about it because they think in 5 months you're going to get $500,000 in ARR. But the timing was just absolutely perfect, and they managed to do things in a good way. Hippo and CMS, They came in really late. They're a Dutch company. The three founders met in college, started a competitor to WordPress. I mean, you know that the revenue streams of a company like WordPress, it's tough to charge money in a market where everyone else is doing stuff for free, right? So they had to really figure out what was their differentiation. And they had a Java-based platform, and they were in the Apache councils, and they were very active with open source. So they really took the open source angle and the Java angle and wanted to be the best in the planet for companies that had that architecture. And they also sold remotely. They sold via, we got Disney as a client, and we didn't even know until they told us they wanted the contract, because 10 months earlier, they'd gone online, they downloaded the tools, they'd implemented the setup internally, they tested against 30 other applications they looked at, and they picked us. They gave us a call one day and they said, hey, we want $500,000, we want a contract. And it was a $500,000 contract. And they had no feet on the street in the US at all. They got it completely remotely. But they did that because they were differentiated. If they hadn't been differentiated, they would have been dead. Gravity in Budapest, a Hungarian company, they won the Netflix prize, first one in 2009. Out of 30,000 entrants or something. They were all students, and there was a professor, the guy that became the CEO. And they went like traditional Hungarians, no offense to our Hungarian neighbors. You know, the Hungarians to me are wonderful at going to the right and to the left. They're like the butterfly. You know, they look both directions in terms of their market strategy. So they had customers with Alibaba, they had customers in Turkey, they had customers in Europe, and they had customers in the US. And they were like 30 people. So think about that. I mean, it was not an easy thing for them. And they were in recommendation engines, which is also a dime a dozen. It's a great market, but it's super flooded. But they were the first ones to bring deep learning to this market, the very first on the planet, as far as I know. And NVIDIA would reference them left and right as the people that really invented deep learning for cold start, GDPR compliant recommendations. So really interesting, but they came late and they had to create a differentiator in their deep learning work. Algolytics, I'm not going to get into algolytics now, but there's also things around company maturity, Synchronize in terms of product clarity, privacy check in terms of being a feature and not a product, Quartus being more of a consultancy and really getting more services revenue and having challenges switching over to subscription revenue, and so on and so forth. And then there's some examples of different clients and how it was that they were triggered, how they were converted. So these are things that we'll touch on throughout the session today. Large network, and also I would say we'll talk about this at the end, this idea of venture cloud. So we have a new platform that we just launched that'll help. So what we're going to teach is going to be talking about basically trying to 5x your exit value. So what industries are you working in? What business functions do you sell into? So we already heard, so law, and you're selling into, I guess you're selling to the CEO as like a sort of all-in-one service of some kind. What are some other industries that we're selling into in the room here? So anyone selling into manufacturing? Manufacturing. What about manufacturing? What about utilities and energy? Anyone in utilities, energy? What about retail e-commerce? Okay. What other areas? Any other verticals? So no travel, no, let's see, logistics. Logistics. Okay. So we're talking about what, the DHLs of the world, or like package delivery, or what kind of delivery? Any other examples? Okay, good. And the functions you sell into, who's your best title when you sell? If you have that person across the table from you and you have a whole day and they're relaxed and listening, who would that person in your best case be? What title? R&D leaders. R&D leaders. Could someone say CTO? CTO. Others? Okay. I mean, I'm really surprised. CEO also. CEO. Okay. In my mind, I would just say, and this may be a function of my biases, but so R&D leaders and the CTO, these guys are on the technical side of the business. Now, I'm assuming they have a business corollary. There's some business partner they have, someone who doesn't know the technology, but does have a extreme amount of experience in the company, 20 years in the business, and has this very senior title. Maybe they run the P&L of the business unit. So there's some business person. I tend to call them the VP of digital or the VP of transformation or something like that. So I'm just going to put that here, the transformation. And I think this will be maybe one of the big aha moments this whole day is you know, your entire go-to-market strategy has got to also include, you got to open the tent and include these guys, because without their support, these guys will never get the largest budgets that they want as quickly as they want. So, you know, generally what I see in companies, especially hardware companies or early stage companies, is they spend so much time explaining what it is that they are to their investors and to their friends and kind of clarifying what it is they're doing, that their website is very product centric. And we all know this, we've all heard this a million times, but I think unlocking that is really the job of the go-to-market strategy that you need to go through. Oh, whoops. Okay. I have anything left there, so I'll go ahead and do it this way. So I gave some examples before of the natural language company that closed that $500,000 in 12 months. What they did is they went from selling into one customer, which was Microsoft Bing, to selling into 5, which was B of A, United, and a couple of others to experiment, to ramping that up to selling into 300, using the things that they learned, and then making it an automated and repeatable process. Azeti, the company that got Cisco to put their application inside the Cisco router, they picked 25 partner targets on day 1, and they spent 9 months focusing on those things, going one after the next, getting multiple people within those companies. By the end of 9 months, they had a exclusive OEM deal with Cisco. And once they had that OEM deal, 2 other companies on the list, Intel and Dell, came running in because they could see that Cisco was doing something and they got jealous. And they spent about 1/10 the amount of time on due diligence. Cisco spent their armies of engineers to the office for 10 days at a time, and it was very nerve-wracking, as you can imagine, for the engineering team. But that led to 3 partnerships. XTPL, that was an odd one. XTPL, the CEO, they hired us. We worked with the business development lead, started doing our campaigns, our activities. One turned around and the CEO was also in California at the same time. I didn't even know he was, what's the CEO doing here? I didn't even know he was coming. We're here, why are we not getting together for dinner? It was one of those, you can imagine, it was a CEO who's very, very, skeptical and very sort of risk averse, trying to create a parallel process, do his own thing while we were doing our thing. And actually it became amazing because there was a moment where we converged what we were doing and it really blew it out. It was a beautiful, unexpected approach I'd never thought of. Kind of bothered me at first. I was like, why is the CEO not communicating to us? In other cases where people are doing, say, 2 markets at a time. So you're doing, Northwestern Europe and the US, and you're kind of capturing your validations and you're baking them into your sales process simultaneously. And then if the US isn't working out, you back off and you focus on Europe. So there's a bunch of interesting different tactics I think that we can talk about there. So I've already gone through this example of the natural language company where they focused on the niche, the US market and these industries, selling into the VP of digital, focusing on those 3 vertical markets, and then landing deals and all of a sudden getting on the radar of acquisitions. So they got acquired after 12 months by a company called Right Now. They were the second fastest growing SaaS company behind Salesforce at that time. They were in customer care. And then Oracle bought Right Now. And what I found was that the growth techniques we're going to talk about today became the kernel post-acquisition in the acquiring company. So we ended up being the team within the company of Right Now, 1,000-person company. We were 70 in the Netherlands. And our team of the CEO, the head of commercial, the commercial VP, the head of operations, are, I don't know, 5 to 8 people that were all involved in the sales process from marketing and pre-sales architecture, solutioning, et cetera. We all got sucked in to this sort of SWAT team that was then within Right Now pushing this new wonderful widget into the hands of the sales force. Because you know the sales guys, they don't want to bring in something they aren't familiar with and sell it to their client. You're stepping on their turf the moment you do that. So we had to use that team and work in coordination. And then Right Now got bought by Oracle for like $1 billion. And the same thing happened. Our team in the natural language group ended up becoming the global engine within Oracle that was pushing these new solutions into the organization. So when you're building these growth muscles, you're also helping yourselves as founders, because unless you're planning to be acquired and you become the R&D center for the acquirer, and so you don't really need to worry about sales, most likely some of your cash in your pocket will be based on the results after you're acquired, and you'll want to have a very strong growth team to help execute and meet the expectations from your acquirer. We can go, okay, wonderful, thank you. Those are just some examples for you. Now, okay, so who has customers in the rest of the world? So outside of Poland. Okay, great. So guys, how did you get that client? How did it happen?
Well,
Go ahead and stand up if you like. Yeah, maybe say your name and say your name in the company.
Davis, I'm a law firm management. If anybody knows the first, you can always send it to us. So yeah, well, we did inbound. We targeted global keywords, and they start coming in. That's the first wins we had.
Simple hack.
That's his first step.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess it was pretty straightforward because, you know, you're targeting law firms. So
Yeah.
it's not like you're going to get a, you know,
Well, yeah,
retail.
Typical drill, you target your competitor keywords, right?
Yeah.
All the typical stuff. There's nothing, there's no miracles.
Yeah.
And of course, after the rest of the world for us is our region where we sandbox the markets. So
Yeah.
we see more influx of people coming than we target with outbound and campaigns and all the rest of the stuff.
Yes. Anyone else? And this client was which country?
First client.
The international, the one that's outside of Poland. Which country was it in? You have
That's a
lots
good
of.
question.
Okay.
We forgot already which one.
Yeah,
was
sure.
that.
Are you? You're in 70 countries. Oh, amazing. I remember the first one. Other people, who's got clients outside of Poland? Yeah, where is the client?
We have in Mexico.
Mexico. Yeah, you mentioned Mexico. And how did that happen?
It was outbound, so cold calling
Okay.
through social selling, and I would say the trick there was high quality prospecting. So at the very, very beginning of the fishing pot, we selected the SMB property.
But also timing was on our favor because they were in the process with the competitor that we finally.
Okay. Yeah, the timing. Oh man, that moment where they've got budget and they're actually looking for stuff.
Yeah,
Oh,
exciting.
boy. Yeah, it's a great moment that one. So other examples of, yes.
Yes, I'm Darius, and so our first customer was in Sweden. It was network of like our contacts, but generally we just go to exhibitions, the worldwide exhibitions. We have distributors who have their contacts. So we have customers in Korea, China, US.
Wow, Korea and the US. I mean, can you are you selling into and supporting clients in Asia and North America?
Yeah, we have to. Right? So
Wonderful.
that's that we are globally and working working with distributors for us is very important.
Yes.
So technical, technology.
And how do you, when you work with your distributors, do you sell direct also, or you just sell through channel partners?
So it's a mixture.
It's a mixture.
We want to have distributors because this is a channel that can help us with after sales as well. And make some growth from what we do directly. Yeah, a mixture.
That's awesome. Other examples? Clients? Okay, great. So yeah, I mean, a lot of times companies either consciously outbound or they do an inbound initiative. They get these clients, and but it doesn't mean that they've firmly decided they want to focus on that industry. What we're talking about today is when you make that decision to focus on a niche and make it happen. Imagine what a breakthrough feels like. I mean, boy, this is a scary picture, isn't it? What a depressing. You're doing this thing that's the dream of your life, and you're sort of in line. So what does a breakthrough feel like? You know, what does it feel like? So here we're going to talk about challenges to early tech firms, how to do go-to-market discovery, how other people did it. So generally, I'm a believer in simplicity. I kind of think there's two legs of this. One is about the product, one is about the growth architecture. And that's pretty much it. There's a lot of other factors we can talk about. This question, of course, I can't tell you the number of times in Europe, especially the last couple of years, where I start seeing the same applications, you know, in two different countries, you know, and you're like, oh boy. And both companies are super strong in their local market, but they have not necessarily figured out how they're differentiated in that other European market, let alone in that other international market. In growth architecture, how do you engage a niche effectively, cost effectively, frictionless? So there's these different moments in your life cycle of growth. You kind of get your, you get your initial customers and your feedback, and you kind of plateau. You know, you're really developing, building out that product roadmap. The earlier you can bring the feedback for your product in terms of the international competitive landscape and mindset of the executives, I think the better, because as a former product guy, I know I only have a finite amount of resources with my engineering team. And if I give them a list of 100 things to build and 30 of them are not contributing to that global sale as a global architecture, then I want to know that. And I want to know what 30 features are going to be in that list of 100 that will give me that global architecture. From a sales and growth perspective, until you really understand how to share unique usable insights with your prospect, not just telling them the thing they heard from the last 5 vendors to come through their door, and get that pre-located or get that in front of the executive, the harder it's going to be. And generally what you want to try to avoid is that fatal pinch, you know, where you've overextended yourself, you've hired your team, but the revenue growth is still only 5 or 10%. And you're seeing that you're going to run out of cash. So doing these things before you hire armies and you get your unit of economics correct with your growth process, and also are clear about your North Star, are important. Generally, we believe in building a small team of people. Usually it's comprised of between 1 and 3 people. Clarifying some questions that you're going to be asking into that foreign market, identifying target companies, and spending a couple, 3 months doing this discovery. You're unpacking things. Sometimes I've had people say, oh, we already knew that. After we get through that process, we say, oh, it's okay if you already knew that. We're validating it. And it's good that it's true, because it means you don't have to change much. And sometimes you'll discover other things. So you repack, and then you go into your scale mode. The examples we have here, I've already talked about several of them, but in the case of, so I talked about the QGO example, that was the NLP company. First, they tested in the market. Then they landed some clients while they were still remote. They didn't put any bodies in the country. They landed 2 clients. Then they actually exited. That wasn't on purpose. That wasn't what they'd intended. And I didn't like it actually, because I was there as a team member, and I was going to be comped on the bonuses for all these great clients we had in the funnel, but then we got acquired, and that was great for the founders. And then the executive team actually moved to the US after the exit. Okay, so there was kind of a, these things can happen in lots of different orders. We had another example, well, 8XTPL, where they tested the market. And I told you there was that CEO parallel track where the CEO was running around doing exactly what we were doing, but with his network. And then they opened a US office. They're a public company. Surprisingly, they're on the Polish Stock Exchange. You guys know how that game works. So it's a little struggle actually, because they, the early stage company on the stock market. But they saw their valuation boost around this time by about 50 million. I think it was zloty. I'm not sure if it was euros or something. Anyway, huge boost after a couple of years of being flat. There was something going on that happened during that period where they got that value growth. Adyen went from testing to directly to a partner strategy. They landed the partner. Then they landed a client through the partner, Verizon. Then the CEO and the pre-sales team moved over there. And then they exited to a German industrial company. So again, it created some jealousy back in the home country, and they got bought. So you see, there's a whole range of different ways it happened. Hippo, they sold Disney. I told you already, they sold Disney through their downloadable free stuff. They tested the market with those while they had those new clients. Then they hired into the country, then they exited. So there's lots of different ways of doing it. The ways I've seen it failed. One company, they started the testing, they built up their funnel, and then they stopped. They paused. They had a funnel that they were building. They left a lot of things that were on the table with that funnel. So just in terms of how you squeeze things, another one that tested, they got nervous that they didn't have the right information and it wasn't validating things how they thought about it. And they began to sort of question the process, and they just kind of went off sideways, and people lost confidence in doing things. So I'll share the deck later. This will drill down exactly into what types of activities are in that unpacking mode and that repacking mode, and then that scale mode. But in a nutshell, you've got your virtual team. You're doing a quick online assessment. So you're seeing how is the website, the LinkedIn, the various aspects of the business perceived by a non-company person. So an outsider like us, or we'll talk to some people and have them review those. You're building out your target lists and your personas. What are the key discovery questions that you need to have answered? And you're picking 10 friendly targets, people that are in exactly the roles that you're looking for in the right companies. I'm a believer in using affinity networks. This is a good way of collecting information in a way that's trusted, as someone who will tell you what they really think. Then you can use that with some cold outreach examples. You end up validating what your unique usable insights are, so that when you're presenting your information to an executive, they're not falling asleep and thinking, oh, I've seen this 10 times before. You're bringing those unique insights that you have already, but you have to really identify them. And in some cases, you're actually validating which use cases to focus on. That's a little bit not as common, because by the time you've gotten to where you guys are now, you kind of know what you do. But there may be some cases where you need to decide, simplify things. And then finally, this idea of outlining the video script, which is a simple thing in what it sounds like, but it takes 4 to 6 weeks of writing and rewriting and writing and rewriting. But that becomes the basis of all. Yeah.
In terms of product architecture, you put some particular product features of market that value that marketing should focus just about on just on.
Okay, yeah, good question. So let me just forward here a little bit. So I think when it comes to the inbound versus outbound question, yeah, I don't know this will answer your question directly. I tend to think that there's no other way if you're internationalizing than doing outbound first in a conscious way, where you're explicitly looking for nuggets of insight into how you're perceived. So for example, if I do inbound, but I've never looked at the eyes of my buyer, and I've sort of drilled 2 levels deeper into what they're thinking when they're listening to my presentation, then I'm going to miss the barriers, the friction. I'm going to miss the questions that pop in their head, and I won't be able to explain what I do correctly because it'll require an additional meeting for someone to physically explain and answer that question for the executive. So I believe that both for hardware and for software, that outbound always needs to come first. And it always needs to be done in a way where you are explicitly gathering those obstacles in the heads of your buyer, and then you're baking them into your inbound process. So, I mean, inbound historically worked because the market wasn't as competitive. And both from a product point of view and also from an inbound technique point of view, but that's over. You know, the Poland was really good at inbound. I think Poland was one of the best at inbound, 10 years ago, and really leveraged it. But the problem is everybody learned pattern. It's not a long-term pattern. You have to insert yourself in there first and do but you maybe respond to what I'm saying so I can see whether we're getting to a common view or not. What do you think about what I'm saying? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I'm a big believer that inbound is massively the way to be, but you've got to go through the pain first of a very focused discovery process where you understand not just how to present your product, but you understand how to explain to the executive 3 things. I mean, why is what you're doing important to them? Because some executives don't know, especially the business guys. You know, the CTO and the R&D guy, they may know exactly. You just say a word and they know. You know, ASIC or whatever, ASIC or some of the terms in semiconductor that I read on your website, Pavel. So answering the question why, 50% of the business executives need that. Answering the question what, like what the heck is this thing? What's the terminology? What's the way of thinking? What's the framework? That's another 30% need to know what is it. Now, once you've got those 80% tackled, there's 20% or 10% out there that know how to do it. They're like, they know why and what, and they're trying to figure out how. But those are the 3 things that need to be really clear. And until you've done outbound to discover the nuances of those things, you can't do inbound really well. That's how I see it. But inbound in the end is the goal, because it's massively successful if you've got the whole thing dialed in. So I'm gonna skip around a little bit here. So we have some, and again, I'll provide this later, but we're, I think I got through most of this stuff. Yeah, so imagine what a successful growth strategy looks like. Very squishy question, growth strategy, ick, what a icky word. But in the end, selecting your market, how strategically important is that market? I mean, I don't know. I'm an American, so I'm biased, but I know there's a ton of exits that happen in the US. So if you don't have a US client or some relevance to that market, I don't know, maybe you'll exit through an Israeli company or a European company, but I view that alone as being a good enough reason to figure that market out, to me. So payoffs versus costs, your ability to exploit that market. Are you in a position where you can actually do something about it if you figure it out? What's the total addressable market? Skills, speed of network, these are basic things. And we've talked about some different examples and how the maturity of the market also matters. And the more mature it is, the more badass you have to be about your differentiation. and not just sitting in a laboratory talking about it with your smart colleagues, but getting out and talking to your clients in the market. Why to be global? I think there's a ton of compelling reasons why to be global. Again, there's some reasons why not to be. I mean, the biggest thing I like is learning the diverse needs of your customers around the world and baking that into your architecture. There's lots of other things. So we're going to move on. Being global, what does it actually mean in this era of COVID? Well, I don't think it means having to be physically places. I don't think that that is required. But having a market presence, having customers, having a distributed team. How many people have 90% of their employees are in their office, their local, the office that they work in? 90%. How many people? So everybody put your hands up, actually. Everyone put your hands up that has a startup that they work at. Everyone that's working at a startup or a technology firm. Hands up, guys. And you too. You guys know? Okay. Yeah. All right, keep your hands up. So if you have 90% of the people in your office right now, then take your hands down. Okay, if you have 70% of the people in your home office, then hands down. 60%, 50%, 40%, 30%. Okay, so interesting.
You mean home?
You're well in one office, one regional office. Yeah, like a Warsaw, like a building, and you've got people there. Anyway, there's no question that dispersed teams are becoming more of a thing, and supply chains. So it may be that you're, you're producing globally, like I don't know, Target or Walmart. You know, these guys are getting stuff from around the globe and they sell it locally. So they're got a global supply chain and a local sales thing. Your capital base, and what I think is actually probably one of the most important areas is the mindset. Do you have a global mindset or not? And a global mindset has a relevance because it allows you to see things in the market. It allows you to see opportunities in the market. It also allows you to create a culture in your business. It makes you an attractive place to work. It makes people want to come and be a part of your company. So being global. So why be global? What does being global mean to you? And what will your global company look like? Why don't you guys talk to each other? Pick a person next to you. Talk a little bit about these things. You know, for you, what does being global mean to you? And what will your company look like in 3 years? So go ahead and take a couple minutes and talk about that. Wow. So who would like to share what their company will look like 3 years from now? Anyone? What do they envision for their company? Come on, this is your baby. This is your.
Yeah, we want to be a leading supply chain software vendor. Yeah.
I'm assuming the global dominant law platform for XYZ.
I'd say, well, we want to be the #1 global management platform in non-English speaking markets.
Okay.
Which means
Global domination.
Great. Any other? You know, the #1 player in your category globally, of course, or 2 or 3. I mean, top 5. Let's say top 3 to 5. If you're not looking to become a top 3 to 5 category player in the planet, you should go do something else. Honestly.
The next 3 years, right?
Yeah, the next 3 years. Okay, the next 3 years. Okay, right. Okay, so lots of ambition in this room. Lots of ambition in this room. The fact that you guys are where you are speaks. When to physically be there. So if anyone's read the Index Ventures ebook on internationalizing, oh boy, I loved reading that thing. I was like, oh my gosh, someone's actually like put on paper a lot of the things I intuitively feel, but I can't explain very well. And they explained it this way. They said, when do you physically go globally? Well, and get preemptive. So get in the face of your prospects, have them learn about you in the right way. So first, there's the boots on the ground. How many people do you have to have on the ground to sell, deploy, support your customers? So an IoT company, for example, we needed to have electricians with screwdrivers that actually could like install something on a telephone tower, a cell tower, or a utility substation. What's the total addressable market in that geography? You know, is it small or is it big? Well, if it's a big addressable market, it's a growing market, and it's low boots on the ground. So you don't need to have people. The sooner that you do it, the better. That's how I see it. Now, you don't have to go crazy with it, but you do need to create your team as soon as possible and get them doing this work in parallel to all the other important work you're doing. Don't stop what you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing, but carve out a parallel track. Don't be sequential. Be parallel. It's equally good. It's actually better. And test and analyze your thoughts, and you can actually then move into an at-scale sales support, sales deploy and support model remotely. You can do a lot of it remotely. And you guys in Poland, you know most of this because you guys are really good, I think, at doing this international stuff. If you're going into a market that has low total addressable market and high boots on the ground requirements, well, anchor where you are. Keep doing what you're doing. At some point along the way, maybe in your Series A or your Series B, you can really dedicate that team. I mean, in any case, it's going to be the same initial half a year for these guys as it is for these guys. It's a small team. They're getting out into the field. They're collecting purposeful stuff. They're drilling into those double drill downs of the questions in the executives' heads in those foreign markets and identifying competitors they didn't realize were there that are substitutes for them, maybe even have a different architecture. Some people perceive it as a better architecture, a more long-term architecture. You got to battle with that. You got to sharpen your swords and be able to battle with it. So you can see that there's different scenarios. If you are, you know, it's a high market, but requires, well, let's take the low boots on the ground, but a small market, then you want to be differentiating your product because, you know, eventually you're definitely going to be there. You're going to need to focus there. But by the time you get there, there may be a ton of competition. So there's different ways of thinking about how and when you engage a market and you get into the physical side, And to me, what I like about this is it points back to what we're talking about here today, which is go out and get your act together and adapt your business a bit. I also want to say, as an American guy, look, I mean, the developing, you know, the emerging markets, like 3 to 4x growth. So Latin America, and, you know, I mean, the US, of course, is not the only market. Europe's not the only market. Those are the markets that I focus on. Okay, but there's obviously a ton of opportunity out there in the geographies. So in terms of the idea of, you know, selecting a market, there are, you know, it's somewhat intuitive, but there's certain characteristics. There's a bunch of reasons why you'd want to do it. In a way, you know, if you're in the startup business and you're trying to get returns to your investors 5x in 5 years, which is what they want, then you got to be international. There's just no way. But the mindset is really key thing. Understanding how boots on the ground play into your sales process, your implementation process is important. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple of other things, and then we'll open it up for some questions. We've got like 15 more minutes. So, I mean, if you could just explain in a clear way to the 300 companies in the world that you think would be the perfect customers, and, you know, do it simultaneously in an interactive way to the point where that executive purely understands what you do, you know, wouldn't that be awesome? I mean, the noise in the market is so hard to get the good technologies out there, so noisy, so many competitors. I mean, this startup game, boy, it's a tricky game. I thought it was competitive 20 years ago when I did it. You know, I was like, damn, it's competitive. Yeah, it's competitive. So translating your growth strategy into a growth architecture is really critical, because a growth strategy is squishy and it's an icky word. But if you approach things properly, you can have a architecture which is concrete. It's physical world. It's real. There are traffic sources you can begin to use, the inbound, outbound question. Like I said, I believe video sales letters are the linchpin to all of it. And I would be surprised if any of you guys have a sales letter that is the one I'm talking about, because this is one where you literally spend time understanding those fundamental core beliefs that you have to change, and then really scripting out, addressing that executive's needs, seeing the whites of their eyes when you're presenting it to them, and then adapting it so that you get closer to what they need. And then this question of inbound versus outbound and how those two interplay. So I think that the mechanism for getting from these two things is taking the knowledge that's in your heads and in your most important people's heads, getting it into some content that can be pre-located. In other words, you can get that content into the face of that prospect. Using your inbound as a way of tuning, and then using your outbound as a way of tuning, and your inbound as a way of scaling. So to me, these are the molecule. This is the most basic building blocks of, and there's a similar one on the product side. If you put those two together, to me, that's the perfect widget to be acquired by another company or to be used by another company. So there's lots of traffic sources. You know, there's the stuff that we typically are doing in the beginnings of our project around outbound. There's channel partners. Channel partners are great as long as you keep that, you know, that direct side of the sales process. So you know what your customers need. And you know, I talked to well, Pavel, we had a chat last night, you know, about the Russian dolls. I use the Russian dolls analogy, but the idea of, you know, you know, if you're selling a chip into a device and device into a solution, and the solution guys at the consulting firm are the ones interacting with the customer, you know, it's tricky, you know, because you're a couple steps removed from that customer. And I know that I'm not explaining it right, so you'll correct me later, but this idea of having partners is a blessing and a curse, so you need to have both. Getting into your organic, your content development, your organic social media, your paid, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a bunch of ways of doing it. And I just want to acknowledge those things. But in our view, building out those, unpacking and testing assumptions, identifying those unique usable insights, and then repacking it and pre-locating it so you can start to trigger the buyer is what you're wanting to get to. And again, I view the video sales letter, which I'm not going to go into the details of today, but I'd be happy to sit down and talk to you. It's a little bit of an infomercial style thing, but it's pretty effective. And then this ends up spinning into all of the other types of conversion mechanisms you have. So, you know, inside sales, so people that are selling but not, you know, on the road. Outside sales, email marketing, all of those sort of automations you have for remarketing and marketing, your landing pages and your communities. All of these things need to be consistent with what this first blueprint does. And if you do it that way, then you will be, you'll be really effective. So I believe video sales letters, again, are the backbone for your conversion mechanisms. And you know, a single video can give you 6 months of wonderful content in terms of micro videos and other things. So you again can read this stuff later. It's more of a scaffolding thing of how things work. This is an example of a project we did last year where they had 8 vertical industries at the start of the project. Now, I'm a little guilty of that too, because when we did our company, we had lots of verticals, but I think we did it not exactly right. So going through and saying, okay, based on the application, what are the top verticals? Based on the application solution, what are the top geographies? Along the way, maybe tinkering a little bit with some partners and some future exit partners and so forth. But the idea of target segments, functions of the business, and going through and really making the tough choices, because, you know, as you guys know, anyone that says, I can help anyone, what can you help them with? I can help them with anything. You know, so I've had a lot of startups that tell me that I can help anyone with anything. So it's sort of like, boy, it's not credible. As you know, the more narrow, the more focused you are, the more likely it is that your customer will look at you and go, holy crap, this guy is a world expert in what I need. I need to work with him or her. So that idea of being an expert and distilling it down, the same thing for validating insights. So use cases, we had a list of about 40 of these. We came up with 5 at the end. And they were very specific roles we focused on. Normally what our exercise is about is, or what we emphasize on these, you don't have to do this with us, you could do this yourself, is that you're really focusing on that business executive. Because that's the executive that's typically a little bit not truly respected in the websites when I look at the websites people have. And I'd love to sit down with any one of you and look at your website and give some quick feedback on that. So figuring out your content roadmap, so you've got that clarity on the business gains or the logic or the fear, you know, whatever those things, and kind of having that roadmap validated, having your action flows, knowing how your outbound and your inbound processes can be designed. So you've got your distributed team, you're 30% of the people are in your office and 70% are out in the field, or 90% are in the office. In both cases, you have that playbook. And when you hire your VP of sales, or your VP of sales is like, okay, I really need to put my foot on the gas pedal, he or she has everything they need to go crush it and go take the right hill with the right tools. I'm also a big fan of pre-location in the physical world. So organizing parties like what's WEG did, Worse Equity Group did when we had that gathering, that summit north of Legionovo. That was great. Being able to do that also though with industry players. So as an example, I will just, I don't know if I can show this or not. Oh, maybe it's down here. So I'll just show something that we did. No, is it the?
It's good sound here.
Is it? Well, anyway, oh. So last month we had about 60 executives in Amsterdam, Adidas, ABB, Philips, the VPs of transformation, and we invited all these guys because our clients wanted to meet those people. So we organizing gatherings where you invite, literally, you make the invitation list 3 months early for people in the room, or when you guys do your WEG stuff next year, being able to bring in those executives, making them feel welcome, making them feel at ease. Maybe you carve out some focus groups where you're leading the focus group, and there's a topic that's compelling. We'll pull some people and make sure that they're in the focus group. All these types of things are ways of physically pre-locating. You don't have to go out and machine gun the market and run around traveling and knocking on doors and meeting people in their cafeterias and their offices. You can bring all of them to you. Okay, so that's a pre-location. Pre-locating can be taking a video and distributing it effectively to the right person in the right company and explaining it in a way where they actually take the time to watch it, because it's like they're really surprised at how you're reading their mind. Or pre-location can be throwing a party in the physical world. Those are, to me, great examples of how you, in the COVID era, can sort of jujitsu your sales process, especially with those important target companies. It's okay, it's no big deal. We don't have to do this. Okay. We rented a boat in Amsterdam last year in October 2021. We had FedEx and Uber and SAP. Well, SAP is more of a partner, but we had lots of DHL's had a managing director was there. We did something in San Francisco, 2013 to 2018. Every year, we would do something in Microsoft's office there in downtown. And all of these things are small, but they allow relationships to be built, and relationships are really important for enterprise. Right.
Told you we are a technology company.
Yeah, sorry about that. I got us off track with the video thing. But the idea of outbound is a great way to tune things, to understand how to get your content laser focused, but also to reach out and you can throw a party. And parties are also good for building those relationships. Talent. The last thing I'll mention here is I'm a huge believer of young talent. There's we've worked with a couple hundred young people throwing them on projects and just saying, hey, go off in LinkedIn for 2 months and connect with these people, and maybe having some veteran folks, some advisors from different companies that can come in and provide some perspective. So there's a whole process around when you get into the inbound side of things. After doing outbound up here, you start to get into, you're iterating. So you're repacking and tuning your foundation copy. You're going into these interactions. Are you getting the ratios you look for? Like we generally see 20% connections in LinkedIn, for example, for scenarios that are good, maybe 5% when they're not going so well. You can have an amazing technology, but it's in a very busy space, and it can get a low hit rate, or 2 to 5%. So these connect ratios will tell you a lot. Eventually, you're going to get down to this question of, are you perceived as unique? Can you scale up your lead gen? Are you getting $1 back for every dollar you're putting in to this machinery when you start to spend money? But scaling up, becoming a master of scale, using the unpaid traffic campaigns, building your profitable sales team, working into your inbound, your paid inbound, once you've got this first piece in place, and not hiring until you can hire some basic stuff, but you don't really want to blow out the doors until you've got it tuned up. And of course, there's different phases of how much automation you want to have. Using video rather than using a person to explain something. I don't know. I don't understand why an executive, a founder would ever want to explain themselves over and over and over again, get all that stuff in a really nice automated video for yourself. So again, the first thing you're going to do, unpack, validate. Second, you're going to test with outbound. You're going to codify your stuff, and you're going to scale that up. And you can do majority of that remotely. And once you've got that remote stuff dialed in, you can actually start your international expansion. So this presentation has been generally for B2B companies who have a great product. They know it. They're not quite sure exactly what the competition looks like everywhere, but they know pretty well. But they're committed. They have an ambition to be a top 5 category leader on the planet. Also for VCs that have strong portfolios, companies, and they want to support them and get them on that track to success. So we've talked about translating a growth strategy into a growth architecture. We've talked about different traffic sources, talked about video sales letters, and why I believe, even as a guy who's been in B2B for 20 years, if you can imagine, I can't believe it, but I've been in it for 20 years, and it's only the last 2 or 3 years that I've seen the light on video, and I'm now completely convinced that is where you need to spend money, and that will unlock your market, done properly. And the interplay between outbound and inbound. And I did think a lot about the hardware versus software question before in the last couple of months, or last month rather, as I knew I was coming, I was like, hardware, software, because 70% of the companies we worked at have been software. But microelectronics with XTPL or Adyen, the IoT device company, we've done the hardware. And I think my conclusion is that this methodology is equally important to both, including the inbound outbound question, but there are some nuanced differences. In terms of boots on the ground, you might have to have more boots on the ground for a physical product. In terms of your research and development, you're still going to do it here because you got the talent and cost structure here in Central Europe. It's a huge advantage over anyone in the world. So you want to use that in both cases, I suppose. But in hardware, like Pavel last night, if you don't mind, and we talked a little bit about, luckily I had one person to talk to before I came here to you guys. And I was like, look through my deck. I felt terrible. You're like, why is this guy showing me my deck? But, on your website, you've got your chips for navigation, your chips for medical health. There were various products that were on that website. Digital solutions are much more agile. You can talk about a use case in digital and kind of make your product look like you've got it pretty easily, depending upon how you explain it and configure it. Hardware is not that flexible. So in hardware, you really do have to pick sort of a product or an area that you're going to focus. So in closing, what do you need to be able to do this efficiently? I love this idea of packing, unpacking, packing, unpacking, and I can speak for myself as a founder. You always have to be able to do this. Focusing on individual activities, but understanding which activities are driving value for the customer and reducing your costs. Those two things. Not every activity is equal. And we go through a project and we just check off the boxes and every activity has an equal place at the table. No, some activities are more important than others. And every activity needs to be customer or cost oriented. Fast feedback loops, direct from the markets, experiments, success building your confidence, your sales copy. When you're hiring your people, you're showing them how to take the hill. You're not saying go take the hill, and you're not, if they fail, you shoot them and you get the next one. That's just a horrible pattern. Don't do that. People, team, and coordinating communication. It just requires coordination, communication. There's an extra layer that is required. So again, the mindset. Stop thinking there's a silver bullet. It's hard work. You got to go. You can't cut corners on it. Deepen your knowledge of those other markets. And again, coming back to interruption. So changing the beliefs, the core beliefs. So you're disrupting this person's thinking. You're ensuring that you're going to reduce the friction for them to buy your stuff and trust you. The halo of trust is one of the biggest challenges. Actually, we talk about that some other time. Pre-location. Getting the knowledge to them, you're getting them to your knowledge. Basically, you're not running out and showing up at each person's office. You're bringing that video directly to them, and it's actually speaking to them because you've got it so dialed in. It knows exactly the criticisms they're going to have of you, and you address those issues before it even comes up. Or you get them in a physical room, and you're doing a focus group, and it's an architected, it's an orchestrated sales moment, even though it feels like an event. Or preempting, the idea of getting going before the game has begun. So don't wait. If you wait and go into a competitive market, we've already seen the results. It costs you more money. You have to be much sharper in your efforts. So you guys can go and think a little bit about the advantages and disadvantages of having this team parallel track. You can think a little bit about what necessitates your decision to be global and what global means to you. Example. So when you head home, think about whether your business is ready to be global today. Do you promote a global vision with your team, with your clients? What would you have to change to say that you're global? There's lots of other resources out there. We've got some resources. There's this new platform, this Venture Cloud platform. Lots of books. I'd be happy to share some stuff if you'd like. Some more information about us, the Venture Cloud. The one thing I'm going to mention, in January 1st, we're going to start a new project. If anybody wants to be involved, we'll do 4 weeks of online breakdown of the company. We'll do 4 weeks of content development. Then there will be a break where people that don't want to continue will spin out. And then we'll continue with the folks that are left. We'll do a US market tour. We have 2 people over there. Companies can go physically or they can do it remotely. The US market, not for Latin America, I don't think. Explore that. But and then we'll have 6 weeks leading up to an event in May in Rotterdam, another party. And you guys are all invited. So thank you very much for the time and attention. And I wish you all great success with what you're doing. And having been in your shoes before, I know the struggles and I really appreciate where you're at. And I just know it's going to be a great success. So thank you again for the time and opportunity.
Thank you.